So, hi, Mark.
Hello
It
there.
is nice to talk to you. I would like first to start by asking you about the role of an event manager. If you can explain that to me and to interpreters, that would be good to know.
Absolutely. Well, that's actually a little of a misconception on people's roles sometimes when you're speaking about things, because you obviously have the event manager who's organizing the event, and then you have um, the the technician that is running the platform. So in our case, it's a very different job role. So the roles that we have, especially with the Interprefy events, we're in charge of liaising with the, if it's a virtual event, liaising with the platform providers, ensuring they have all the details in order to get the interpretation onto their platform, and either sourcing or maybe just liaising with the interpreters to ensure they have all the right login details to get in there. So that element is far away from the general event manager role, who's organizing the people that are watching the stream and the marketing and everything like that. So we actually get quite a lot of confusion from people that don't understand the differentiation in roles, and we get asked a lot of questions that are really meant for the overall event manager, which we end up passing on. So it's nice to have that difference shown by everyone. So DLC events have been the Middle East partner of Interprefy since for about 18 months now. And we're very lucky to deal with majority of Interprefy broadcasts or requirements in the Middle East. And we really enjoy working with all the different event managers and all the different, sometimes we work with end clients as well. With the end clients, we do, especially if they're organizing their events themselves, we do, I guess, take on more of an event management role, but focused on obviously the RSI platform alone.
So
So yeah,
let's
that's
say you have a client who's new to
mhm,
you, and the client is an organization. They have
mhm.
their own interpreters, and they come to you for the event management part. What would your role entail then?
So as I said, we'd only handle the RSI elements. So if they want to add interpretation to their meeting, they have their own interpreters, that's no problem. We will liaise with the Interprefy projects team, would get the platform books for them, would ensure their interpreters were approved to work on the platform, because obviously that's one of the key features of Interprefy, that we don't just let any interpreter go on without having all the necessary training. And then we'll liaise with them regarding the tests and the demonstrations. Quite often I do demonstrations with clients to show them how the platform works, especially if they haven't used it before. And then a complete end-to-end solution, from the pitching of the idea, the quoting of it, the testing, and then the operation of the event. Obviously, Interprefy have their own remote support team that are present on every event. However, our team also like to be involved. We don't just hand events off when we're doing Interprefy events. We join them on the moderator panel. Firstly, so we can learn, and also so we're involved and we can be that go-between between the end clients and Interprefy. If there's any issues, we can keep that chain of communication in the appropriate order.
Interpreters get trained, as you say, in order to work on the platform. But what about you? What about people who work in the support
Yeah.
part of the platform?
So because Interprefy have their own remote support team, they don't need to provide any training to us. Our only real requirement is to negotiate the contracts with our clients and to set up the logistics of the meeting. Talking about Interprefy training, how did you find the training process with that? Did you find it covered everything you needed? I'm sure you pick up the platforms very easily, but how was your experience of training
Well,
with
my
Interprefy?
experience with getting trained on platforms was a bit different, maybe in the sense that I am a trainer, and
Mm.
I started exploring remote interpreting back in 2016. And the very first time that I gave a training on remote interpreting, it was face to face. It was in Brazil. And we did that with three platforms on the same day. So it was Interprefy and Kudo and Interactio. We had the interpreters in the same location. They received an explanation of the platform, and then they started working in, let's say, a mock session on each of these platforms. And that was December 2019. That was
Right.
beginning of the month when the COVID was discovered in
Good
Wuhan.
timing to hold an event like that.
It was really very different. So then the
Yeah.
way that I received my training was different. Because it was done in a hybrid way. The interpreters were in one place and the platforms were joining us remotely. But then after that, I had a one-on-one to just tweak some points or to make sure that I got it all. So that is how it went. And of course, that was very privileged position to be in, because I could just ask any questions that I needed and have an answer straight away. But with hybrid, the way that events are moving now, so we moved from in person or face to face to fully remote to now hybrid. I see that with my clients, there is more of a tendency now to try at least to get the interpreters in one place. Sometimes it is the participants in one place and the interpreters joining remotely. So all these hybrid meetings taking place, how do you organize that?
So for us, there's two types of hybrid meetings. There's ones where it's a on-site event, but the interpreters aren't available locally. So we have to take the interpreters to work remote, but the audience is all in the room. So in that situation, then we use kind of half of a standard system. So we still have all the audio transmission. So we still have the radiators, we still have the receivers, the transmitter, but instead of the feed going from the booths into the transmitter to go to the receivers, instead we have a like a laptop suite that's all configured with Interprefy, and we take the laptop audio and send that to the receivers instead. And at the same time, we've also got to have a little bit of additional hardware so that the interpreters can see and hear the interpretation. So we have a camera set up if there's not a camera feed available already. And we obviously have an audio feed from the sound desk that we put onto the platform via some hardware. And then that enables the interpreters to have a really clear view of the show, hear it perfectly like they're in the room. But the only difference is obviously they're working remotely. And now the other part of it is when we have a standard event with booths and interpreters and people in the room, but then they also want to take that interpretation and have it available for the people that are watching remotely if they stream the events. Sometimes if there's an event platform involved, they can do the language distribution themselves, in which case we just give them the audio feeds of the various language channels. But then sometimes if it's just, for instance, being broadcast on Zoom or on YouTube Live or Facebook Live, then the people watching remotely will need a solution to hear that interpretation as well as watching that. So that's when we use the one of the Interprefy apps, either the desktop app or the smartphone app. And for that, it's very simple, but obviously we don't have any interpreters on the platform. We have our technicians with our laptops set up as interpreters, and we then ourselves input the audio from the booth system into the laptops that are set on the interpreters, and we broadcast that over the Interprefy platform. So that's one of the aspects I love about Interprefy is it's so versatile in the different ways you can use it. And we haven't even touched on Connect Pro and having it as an actual full video conferencing meeting solution. That's a whole different ball game, which is brilliant. But just the main interpretation feature, there's so many different ways you can use it, and you can combine it in different ways. You can have hybrid, entirely virtual, like all these different elements, which is one of the reasons why we've been intent on getting to Interpretify, because a lot of the other platforms you can't do that.
The communication between the interpreter and the support, of course, is very important in a hybrid meeting or in a remotely interpreted meeting. So I wonder then, what would you like to know? What would the interpreters tell you so that you can do your job better and be able to help them better?
So it varies, I guess, depending on if they're working remotely or if they're on site. I mean, we've been doing translation systems on site since the 90s, and when you're on site, it's always very important to make sure that the environment the interpreter is working in is as perfect as possible, because everyone knows what an incredibly demanding task interpretation is. To listen in one language, understand, repeat in a different language with the correct intonation and the correct phrases. So having, even if it's something as simple as like the airflow in the booth is wrong, or the light's not bright enough, or the light's the wrong height, it may seem like menial things to the average person, but it makes a great deal of difference to the interpreters. So by having that environment as perfect as possible for them, making their job them as comfortable as possible, they're going to obviously deliver a better job. So we're always very, very keen on not only knowing what setup they want in advance, if they prefer the lights in the booths that light up the whole booth, or if they prefer the concentrated desk lights, or how they want their relay set up, for instance. If we know all that in advance, then it makes our job even easier, because we can have everything preset for them for when they arrive. And then the phrase happy wife, happy life, it's very much the same as interpreters. Your job as a technician is immensely easier if the interpreters are happy with what you've done. With remote elements, obviously it's a lot harder. You have no control over the environment that they're in. So we always try and give as much advice as possible, but majority of the interpreters we use are very experienced. So they know what headphones they like, they know what internet connection they have, they know what the best room is to be in their house, or if they're working from a remote office. So there's less to do when they're remote, but then it's more about the communication of the event content, the presentations are going to be shown, the speaker lists, so they know if they've got any questions about pronunciation of a particular name, they can check that in advance. So I mean, I think one thing that I would request more is feedback on the content we provide. We very rarely get feedback. Every now and then there can be an issue with something is pronounced wrong, or some terms described wrong within the interpretation. So if they could feedback to me more with any clarifications they might need that I can go back to the clients and ask, that would be a benefit to me. But in general, I mean, like I said, we work with interpreters all the time. We've got a fairly smooth sailing with them. Normally we understand each other, and we give them what they want, and in return they deliver a fantastic job for us. You obviously have an immense amount of experience in both on-site and virtual events. Which do you prefer? And I'm sure there's pros and cons of each one, but personally, do you prefer working online events or remote, or do you prefer going to the venue and sitting in the booths? Which is your preference at this current time?
Well, each has its own pros and cons, I would say. So many interpreters are globetrotters. They like to travel. They like to combine work with seeing new places. Being in the environment itself where the meeting is taking place is important. There is a totally different feel to an in-person event. And of course, you have your colleagues, you can see them, you can have meals together. So it is a totally different atmosphere. But This means that you always have to travel to be where you need to be. And with the current circumstances where the situation is quite fluid, in the UK, for instance, you have the amber, green, and red lists of countries, and this can change. And each of these has requirements. And now that you need to have a passenger locator form and a PCR test back and forth and so on. In traveling is not what it used to be. I used to just take my carry-on, be there at the airport an hour before the flight, and that would be enough. That is not the case anymore. There's quite a bit of preparation that needs to happen,
Absolutely.
even for a 50-minute flight. So I can see the advantage of working remotely now, because I do not have to spend as much time at airports as I used to, and I can then use my time for other things. And with working remotely, you can work from wherever, really. You are not bound to a particular location, as long as you have the right setup and the right technical requirements in place. Then you are all set. So that also gives more freedom with where you work from. So I totally see the advantages of working remotely as well. And after more than a year of working remotely and seeing colleagues on the screen, I do not feel like we are not really seeing each other. I think we do, and we still communicate and we talk and everything. So I see the advantages of both, but for the time being, with the situation being what it is and how complicated the traveling is, I think I prefer to work remotely.
So am I right in thinking, though, that given, be it 6 months, a year, 2 years, when the situation with COVID is a lot different and the world does open up how it used to be, someone offers you a job with a plane ticket to a beautiful location for 5 days, you're never going to say, "Oh, is there a chance we can do this on a remote platform?" You're going to grab that plane ticket with two hands and get your suitcase packed. Am I right?
It depends on the location, Mark.
Of course.
Yeah, no, but
Very good.
I see. Yeah, of course, there is the charm of traveling. I'm
Yeah.
not denying that. But under the current circumstances, working
Mm,
remotely has definitely been a good solution, a good
exactly.
alternative.
Yeah, I think it's I don't like the phrase "the new normal." I think I think it's a stepping stone what we're doing, but I think that the hybrid element is going to be the way forward. I think we'll continue using platforms like Interprefy well into the future, and I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. But I think on-site events are going to come back because people need, especially delegates, they need that social interaction to get the most benefit out of these events. And I'm sure, given the chance, most of the interpreters, if they can, will want to be on site with them. But then the added benefit of being able to reach wider audiences with hybrid events and be able to get those languages that maybe are not locally available easily from a database of interpreters spread across the world. I think that's going to be a big advantage of using platforms like Interprefy. Can I ask you, regarding Interprefy, what's your favorite parts of the platform? Obviously, you're very experienced in all of them. I'd like to think that Interprefy is probably one of your favorites. But what are the features of Interprefy that really impress you?
I like the timer on
Mm,
Interprefy, that you can plan in advance when to do the handover
mm,
with your colleagues. So the interpreters usually would agree together on the order and who is working when and for how long, etc. And then it is possible to plan that. To have, let's say, a timer for 15 minutes, and then
mm.
you can then focus on what you're doing,
Absolutely.
instead of having to add to what you are doing, watching the time. So
Mhm.
I like the timer feature for the handover.
Absolutely, yeah. One of my favorite parts about Interprefy is the back end support you get from their team, and we obviously, like I said, we're present on the moderator panel quite often, and there's such seamless communication. Having the separate chat windows for the event chat for like a global thing, and then the different channel chats to speak to individual interpreters, and then obviously you can even send people private messages if it's just one person that you need to speak to. Has always been a benefit of ours. You know, it's not a case of you're given the details and left to fend for yourselves. You've always got that support, and they're always very responsive. On the very rare occasion we've had technical issues, they've always been rectified within a matter of seconds, and that wouldn't be possible without having that well-trained team that are monitoring the event behind. If there's anything that you'd want to improve on the platform, what would you have any recommendations on? I'm sure you'd be a very influential voice for the product development teams. So is there anything you'd like to see improved?
If I compare let's say the older platforms, and Interprefy is one of them, with the newer platforms, because of course, during the pandemic, several new platforms appeared. One of the features that I like, and I think many interpreters would agree there, is that the interpreters can see each other. So you do not then have to resort to having a back channel, like whereby or a video call with your colleague. Some interpreters appreciate that visual aid that one can get, and one can see the colleague. We can communicate with the hand signals like we do in the booth. So being able to see each other, I think that would be a good addition, I think, to any of the major platforms.
Thank you very much for your time, Maha. It was great chatting to you today.
Yeah, it was very nice talking to you, Mark. Connecting on LinkedIn is very different, of course, from having that conversation, which gave me more information about what you do and a bit of a look behind the scenes. So thank you very much for your time. It was nice talking to you.
Valuable insight from both sides, I think.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care.